All right, Democratic presidential contenders are campaigning out west ahead of the Nevada caucuses on Saturday. They'll meet again face-to-face tomorrow night for another debate. And there will be a newcomer to the stage, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. He just met the polling threshold to qualify this morning. Nikoke Killion is in Las Vegas. Nicole, how is the Bloomberg campaign responding to this news?
Well, Tom, this morning, the Bloomberg campaign put out a statement saying that qualifying for this debate shows that the former mayor's message is resonating with Americans and that he looks forward to joining the other candidates on the debate stage Wednesday night. Now, keep in mind that Bloomberg is not running in Saturday's caucuses here, where the candidates are now vying for the votes of a more diverse electorate.
Having a cabinet, having a team that is like the rest of America matters. We've got to have representation.
Candidates are making their final pitches in a state where a third of the electorate is black or Latino.
I have had historically overwhelming support from the African American community.
And we're going to win this nomination.
With a comfortable lead in Nevada, Bernie Sanders campaigned in California and Washington state, already looking ahead to states where there will be a new candidate on the ballot.
Mr. Bloomberg, you are certainly not going to win when you have a record in New York City that included racist policies like stop and frisk.
CBS News has learned Sanders aides have privately expressed concern that Michael Bloomberg, with his $415 million in campaign spending, would emerge as their most formidable opponent.
I'm Mike Bloomberg, and I approve this message.
And for the first time, the former New York City mayor targeted Sanders directly in a new digital ad, accusing Sanders of ignoring some of his supporters' aggressive tactics, likening them to President Trump. Back in Nevada, 26,000 voters have already participated in early voting. Some waited as long as 4 hours in line.
We'll try again tomorrow.
I don't know if I'll have enough volunteers.
After the debacle at the Iowa caucus, volunteer Seth Morrison is worried.
When we asked on the training this morning how that will work, what kind of data, what kind of charts, they said, we're working on a video to show you how the paper backup works.
Nicole, that volunteer we just heard from doesn't sound very confident ahead of Saturday's caucuses. So what more do we know about the Nevada State Party's efforts to ensure results are tabulated correctly?
Well, the bottom line is that the party has scrapped the app that was used in the Iowa caucuses, for one, and they announced that shortly after everything that happened in Iowa. Instead, what they will be using is a caucus tool, and we still are trying to learn more about exactly what that is. And while they insist that it is not an app, we do know that it operates on an iPad, and there is a digital component to it. And so one thing that this volunteer told us is that he just saw a mock-up of this for the first time yesterday, and while that alleviated some of his concerns, he still had some questions. So again, this is going to come down to the training of these volunteers and really how much information they get ahead of Saturday's vote. That certainly seems to be the biggest concern right now among some of these caucus volunteers. But the party does insist that they do feel they have an efficient process in place.
Yeah, well, we're certainly down to crunch time. Now, one interesting thing, obviously a developing headline this morning, Bloomberg now coming in second on the latest poll. Bloomberg is not on the ballot in Nevada, but can he still end up winning delegates as a write-in candidate in the caucuses?
Well, look, so far we've seen in Iowa and New Hampshire the opportunity to write in candidates. You'll remember in New Hampshire just last week, that tiny town of Dixville Notch writing in Michael Bloomberg. 3 of the 5 voters there doing that. Also in the Iowa caucuses, certainly there was an option to write in a candidate. Here in Nevada, I think it remains to be seen whether or not that same thing takes place. And certainly both in Iowa and New Hampshire, while Bloomberg did receive some support, it certainly wasn't enough for him to be viable or attain any delegates.
As we saw in your piece, Nicole, Democrats are certainly ramping up efforts to pick at Bloomberg's background, which would suggest perhaps that there is some concern on behalf of them now that he's becoming a major player in this race. So how does Bloomberg's presence on the debate stage tomorrow change the equation for the other contenders ahead of the caucuses?
Well, look, I think it changes everything, right? I mean, up until now, we have not seen the former mayor on the debate stage, and that has been a gripe that many of the Democratic presidential candidates have had. And we have seen them go after the former mayor in very direct but also veiled swipes, really taking issue with the amount of money that he is spending on this campaign. You know, he's virtually bypassing all of these early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, going straight to these Super Tuesday states. And so now these candidates have the opportunity to directly engage Bloomberg, and likewise, he will have the opportunity to engage them directly as well. We saw just yesterday he put out a digital ad going after Sanders, really the first time that we've seen him go after a Democratic candidate so directly. For the most part, his attacks have been focused on President Trump, and certainly he has a lot of questions to answer too. He has come under scrutiny for his record as former New York City mayor, specifically on this controversial stop and frisk policy, which has disproportionately affected African American and Latino men. And as a result, you know, he really hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to answer directly about that. That is likely something he certainly could be pressed on in this debate. He has apologized for the policy, but certainly you can expect not just the moderators, but certainly the candidates likely to take the former mayor to task. Tom?
Things will be interesting. Nicole, thank you very much.